For almost 100 years, a collection of ancient documents rested quietly in museums and archives around the world. They were catalogued, photographed, translated, and then largely forgotten. No controversy. No headlines. Just fragile sheets of papyrus, written in ink and preserved by the dry desert air. But when scholars finally examined them closely, one fact became impossible to ignore. These documents did not come from Jerusalem. They did not come from Arabia. They did not come from Mecca. They came from Elephantine, an island in the Nile at Egypt's southern frontier. And they were written by Jews living there in the 5th century before Christ. That fact alone already challenges many modern assumptions. But what these Jews recorded, how they worshipped, how they understood God, and where they believed sacred authority resided, creates a far deeper problem. One that directly collides with later Islamic claims about Abrahamic faith, sacred geography, and the preservation of monotheism. The Elephantine papyri are a collection of legal contracts, letters, petitions, and administrative records dated roughly between 500 and 400 BC, during the Persian Empire. Discovered in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, they are now housed in institutions such as the Berlin Museum, the British Museum, and collections in New York. These were not texts written by philosophers or theologians. They were written by ordinary people, soldiers, officials, families, and priests. The community consisted of Jewish mercenaries and settlers stationed at Elephantine to protect Egypt's southern border on behalf of the Persian administration. They wrote in Imperial Aramaic, the standard administrative language of the time. These are not later copies or legendary retellings. They are original documents written by the people themselves. And they are explicit about who they worshipped. They worshipped Yahweh, the God of Israel. They prayed to him. They swore oaths by his name. They observed Passover. They offered sacrifices. Most striking of all, they maintained a functioning Jewish temple. Not a synagogue but a sacrificial temple, outside Jerusalem. That single fact already disrupts simplified historical narratives. The Elephantine Jews refer to their God as YHW or Yahweh, a shortened form of the divine name Yahweh. They never call him Allah. They never describe him in abstract or philosophical terms. They speak of him exactly as the Hebrew Bible does, as a personal, covenant-keeping God who hears prayer, judges wrongdoing, and actively protects his people. One letter, addressed to Persian authorities, pleads for permission to rebuild their temple after it was destroyed by local Egyptians. The writers explain that offerings had once been made there regularly, burnt offerings, grain offerings, and incense, until the temple was torn down. They appeal not only to Persian officials, but also to Jewish leaders in Jerusalem, including members of the high priest's family. This was not a rogue sect inventing new beliefs. This was a Jewish community fully aware of its identity, its God, and its connection to Jerusalem. And that matters. Islam later claims that true monotheism was preserved in Arabia while Jews and Christians fell into corruption. The Elephantine papyri tell a very different story. They show Jews openly, clearly, and continuously worshipping Yahweh centuries before Islam, far from Arabia, and with no trace of Meccan sacred geography. There is no mention of Mecca. No mention of the Kaaba. No reference to an ancient Abrahamic sanctuary in Arabia. No hint that pilgrimage or true worship belonged there. If Mecca had been the original center of Abrahamic monotheism, this silence would be inexplicable. These Jews wrote freely about legal disputes, intermarriage, temple destruction, Persian politics, and religious festivals. They named gods, places, and authorities without hesitation. They had no reason to omit Mecca, unless it simply had no relevance to their faith. And it does not appear because it was not part of Jewish religious consciousness. The papyri reveal something else that Islamic theology struggles to account for. Complex Jewish theology already existed centuries before Muhammad, and it does not resemble Islamic theology. These Jews were not ignorant of their law. They observed Passover in detail. One papyrus gives precise instructions for celebrating the feast, aligning closely with biblical commands. This document predates the Dead Sea Scrolls. It predates the New Testament. It predates Islam by nearly 1,000 years, and it shows Jewish law functioning exactly as Scripture describes. There is no indication that their faith awaited correction from Arabia. Sacred direction creates another contradiction. Islam emphasizes orientation toward Mecca as ancient and primordial. The Elephantine Jews do not pray toward Mecca. Their cultural and religious orientation is toward Jerusalem, even while living hundreds of miles away. When their temple is destroyed, they do not appeal to Arabs or Arabian sanctuaries. They write to Jerusalem and Persian authorities. Jerusalem matters. Arabia does not. Islam retroactively places Abraham, Ishmael, and early monotheism in Mecca. The Elephantine papyri show Jews centuries later with no memory, tradition, or awareness of such a center. Sacred geography in the ancient world was not flexible. If Mecca had held Abrahamic significance, it would appear somewhere. It does not. The reason these documents sat quietly for decades is simple: they do not fit later narratives. They do not align neatly with Islamic claims. They also complicate overly tidy versions of Jewish history. But history is not tidy. It survives in fragments, and those fragments matter. These documents force a question Islam must answer but cannot easily resolve. If God preserved true monotheism in Arabia, why do Jews in Egypt under Persian rule centuries earlier show no awareness of it? Why do they worship Yahweh according to Scripture, appeal to Jerusalem, and completely ignore Mecca? The usual response is corruption. But corruption requires evidence. The Elephantine papyri are evidence of preservation, not loss. They also challenge the claim that Islamic theology simply confirms earlier scripture. These Jews did not believe God was unknowable. They did not deny divine presence. They did not reject covenant. Their God walked with his people, judged history, and dwelled symbolically in a temple. That theological world matches the Hebrew Bible. It does not match Islamic theology. And that is the deeper issue. Islam does not emerge as the fulfillment of this world. It emerges as a revision of it. The Elephantine papyri do not attack Islam. They predate it. They do something more unsettling. They remove the historical vacuum Islam requires in order to claim restoration. When Muhammad appears in the 7th century, Judaism is not missing. Christianity is not confused. Scripture is not lost. Archaeology confirms this repeatedly. The Elephantine papyri are one more lock on that door. History was already written. And history points in one consistent direction. The God of the Bible was known. His name was spoken. His worship was practiced. His covenant was remembered. Thanks for watching.